The conference room fell silent the moment the transfer agreement landed in front of me. 32 executives watched without breathing. Across the polished walnut table, my wife slid a fountain pen toward me as though she were offering dessert instead of a knife. "Sign it." Her voice was calm. Too calm. The projector behind her displayed the future of the company I had spent 11 years building. Aster Dynamics. My company. My employees. My patents. My life's work. Every share would be transferred to the Evergreen Group, the corporation she controlled as CEO. Not sold. Not merged. Given away. "If you sign today," she said, folding her hands, "the integration can begin immediately." My fingers rested on the document. I didn't move. The room felt strangely cold despite the summer afternoon outside. Someone coughed. No one dared speak. One sentence on the last page caught my eye again. "The transfer is irrevocable." Irrevocable. I almost laughed. 3 years ago, when Evergreen had been drowning in debt, I had mortgaged everything I owned to keep it alive. Back then, no lawyer had needed to explain what irrevocable meant. Love had been enough. Now lawyers filled the room because love clearly wasn't. She looked at me. "If you're hesitating because of pride, don't." I'm thinking. There isn't much to think about. A few directors exchanged uneasy glances. No one wanted to witness a married couple negotiating like enemies. I looked at my wife's face. Perfect makeup. Perfect posture. Perfect confidence. Nothing remained of the woman who once stayed awake beside me eating instant noodles while we argued over business plans until sunrise. She no longer looked tired. She no longer looked hopeful. She looked successful and frighteningly distant. "Our marriage has never been about ownership," she continued. "This is simply restructuring." I smiled faintly. Restructuring. Yes. My company disappears. It becomes stronger. My employees answer to people they've never met. They'll have better opportunities. My name vanishes. She didn't answer. Silence was answer enough. One director shifted uncomfortably. Another stared at the table. Nobody wanted eye contact with the man about to erase himself. I lowered my eyes toward the signature line. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, my hand began to shake. Not from anger. Not from fear of losing money. From something much simpler. I was afraid. Afraid she might change her mind. The realization hit me so suddenly that I almost couldn't breathe. I wanted this over. I wanted the constant sacrificing to end before I convinced myself to stay. For months I had been telling myself there would be one last compromise. One last favor. One last surrender. There was always another. Always. If she hesitated now, if she looked at me with even a trace of the woman I married, I wasn't sure I'd be strong enough to refuse. So I gripped the pen before my courage disappeared. My signature crossed the page in one steady motion despite the trembling in my fingers. Finished. The lawyer immediately collected the document. No applause. No congratulations. Only paperwork. My wife finally exhaled. So that's settled. Settled. Such an easy word. As if 11 years fit inside it. She stood. The board meeting is over. Executives hurried from the room. Some avoided looking at me. Others offered sympathetic smiles that somehow hurt even more. Within minutes, the conference room was almost empty. Only she and I remained. She placed the signed agreement inside a leather folder. "You made the right decision." "Did I?" "Yes." "For who?" She paused only briefly. "For everyone. Everyone. Except me." She walked toward the door before stopping. "The driver will take you home." "I'll walk." "It's raining." "I know." Without waiting for permission, I left. The rain soaked my suit within seconds. Pedestrians rushed beneath umbrellas. Cars splashed water across the sidewalk. No one recognized the man who had just signed away an empire. Oddly enough, I felt lighter. Not happier. Just lighter. As if a chain wrapped around my chest had quietly snapped. My phone vibrated. A message from Human Resources. "Your executive access has been suspended pending organizational transition." I stared at the screen. That had been fast. Another message arrived. "Your office will be reassigned tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. Not next month. Not after discussion. Tomorrow. I laughed. People nearby glanced at me before hurrying away. Rain mixed with something warm running down my face. I refused to check whether it was rain alone. By the time I reached our house, evening had settled over the city. The lights were already on. She wasn't home. Of course. Evergreen would be celebrating. The security system denied my fingerprint. I blinked. Tried again. Access denied. A moment later, the house manager hurried outside, looking flustered. Sir, I've been locked out. He swallowed. Mrs. Lin updated the security permissions this afternoon. This afternoon? He lowered his head. I'm sorry. I stood there carrying nothing except a soaked jacket. Not even the house welcomed me anymore. Can I collect my things? I received instructions. What instructions? He hesitated. Only personal clothing. I looked at him. No anger. No shouting. Just quiet disbelief. My books. I'm sorry. My father's watch. I'm sorry. My workshop. Silence. That answered everything. I nodded slowly. I understand. The old man looked as though he wanted to say something. Instead, he handed me a small travel bag already packed. Prepared. She had arranged this before the meeting, before asking for my signature, which meant she had never expected me to refuse. Or perhaps she no longer cared whether I did. I accepted the bag. Inside were 3 shirts, 2 pairs of trousers, a toothbrush, nothing else. 11 years reduced to airline luggage. I turned away without looking back. Behind me, the mansion gates closed with mechanical precision. They sounded remarkably similar to a prison door. The cheapest hotel near the river still had 1 vacant room. The receptionist glanced at my drenched clothes and slid a registration form across the counter without asking questions. I appreciated that. Pity was exhausting. The room smelled faintly of old wood and detergent. A narrow bed, a cracked window, a desk barely large enough for a laptop. I placed the travel bag on the floor and sat in silence. For the first time in years, there were no emails demanding my approval, no emergency meetings, no investors waiting for my decision. The quiet should have been comforting. Instead, it rang in my ears. My phone buzzed again. Not from my wife. From an unknown number. Mr. Zhao, I heard about today's meeting. Don't sign any resignation papers yet. We need to talk. No name. No explanation. Just that. Before I could reply, the message was deleted. Deleted by the sender. I frowned. Whoever it was hadn't wanted to leave a trace. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Room service. I didn't order anything. The gentleman downstairs already paid. The waiter handed me a simple box dinner. Rice. Vegetables. Braised beef. There was no card. No receipt. Someone knew where I was. Someone who cared enough to make sure I ate. Yet they remained hidden. I closed the door slowly. The mystery settled beside me like another guest in the room. The next morning, I walked to the old Astor Dynamics headquarters out of habit. My employee badge no longer opened the entrance gate. The security guard looked miserable. Mr. Zhao, I've been instructed. It's all right. He lowered his voice. They changed every executive authorization overnight. That quickly. He nodded. Mrs. Lin's team worked until 3 in the morning. Of course they had. Efficiency had always been her greatest strength. I turned to leave. Sir. I stopped. The guard looked around before slipping a folded envelope into my hand. A maintenance worker asked me to give you this. No name. He wouldn't say. Inside was a single key. Locker 117. Central Station. Nothing else. Someone was playing a dangerous game. Central Station buzzed with commuters. Locker 117 stood near the far platform. My hands remained steady this time as I inserted the key. Inside rested a slim black folder and a flash drive. The folder contained photocopies of internal evergreen financial reports. I flipped through them casually at first. Then my pace slowed. Numbers didn't lie, but they could be hidden. Large consulting payments. Repeated transfers. Shell companies with nearly identical names. Amounts just small enough to avoid immediate suspicion. The final page bore a handwritten sentence. Look at Project Falcon. They used your company to hide it. Project Falcon. I had never heard the name, which made no sense. Every acquisition involving Astor should have required my approval before yesterday. Unless someone had deliberately kept it away from me. My phone rang. This time the caller ID displayed my wife's name. I answered after the 3rd ring. Hello. I heard you went to the office. I was nearby. You don't work there anymore. I noticed. A brief silence followed. I've transferred enough money into your account for a comfortable life. I didn't check. You should. I won't. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not proving anything. Then what are you doing? I looked across the crowded station. People rushed toward trains. Everyone had somewhere to go. I'm trying to remember who I was before every decision became yours. Her breathing caught almost imperceptibly. You think I wanted this? I don't know anymore. You'll understand eventually. Understand what? Another pause. Then, the call ended. She had hung up first. For years, I would have called back immediately. This time I slipped the phone into my pocket. If she had something to say, she knew where to find me. That afternoon, I rented a tiny office above an old bookstore. The landlord apologized for the peeling paint. I thanked him. The room had one window overlooking a crowded intersection. No marble floors. No assistants. No conference table. Just four walls and possibility. As I wiped dust from the desk, footsteps echoed outside. An elderly man entered carrying two cardboard boxes. I believe these belong to you. I stared. Inside the boxes were engineering notebooks, prototype sketches, my father's mechanical watch, even the coffee mug with a chipped handle from the first office I had ever rented. Where did you get these? A young woman delivered them. Who? She refused to leave her name. At the bottom of the second box lay another folded note. Some things were never hers to take. More people are watching than you realize. I folded the paper carefully. Someone inside Evergreen was risking everything. But why? Outside, rain began falling once more. I looked through the window at the city I had helped build, now moving on without me. For the first time since signing the transfer agreement, I didn't feel empty. I felt alert. Something had happened beneath the surface of yesterday's betrayal. Something far bigger than a husband giving away his company. And somewhere inside Evergreen, someone was afraid of what I might discover. The office above the bookstore was so quiet that I could hear the old clock downstairs striking every hour. It was a strange sound. For years, my life had been measured by quarterly reports, investor meetings, and acquisition deadlines. Now it was measured by silence. I spread every document from the locker across the desk. Project Falcon. The name appeared only 3 times. Whoever copied these files had been careful. Every reference was buried inside accounting reports that looked ordinary at first glance. Yet the more I read, the clearer one fact became. Someone had been moving money through Astor Dynamics months before my company officially joined Evergreen, which meant one thing. The decision to take my company had never been sudden. It had been planned. Long before she placed that contract in front of me, a knock interrupted my thoughts. The bookstore owner leaned through the open door. Someone is looking for you. I wasn't expecting anyone. Young woman. Says it's about engineering. I stepped downstairs. A woman wearing a gray coat stood beside the shelves. She looked barely 30. Calm. Sharp eyes. She carried no handbag. Only a thin envelope. Mr. Zhao. Yes. I'm Irish, Shun. I don't believe we've met. We haven't. She glanced toward the bookstore entrance before lowering her voice. I worked in Evergreen's internal audit department. Worked. Past tense. I resigned this morning. I studied her expression. No fear. Just exhaustion. I assume that has something to do with me. It has everything to do with you. She handed me the envelope. I can't stay. What is this? Evidence. Against who? She looked directly into my eyes. I don't know yet. That answer surprised me. You resigned without knowing? I resigned because I knew enough. She turned toward the door. Miss Shun. She paused. Why help me? Her smile was small. Because you were the only executive who never asked accounting to hide numbers. Then she disappeared into the afternoon crowd. I opened the envelope immediately. Inside were copies of approval logs, electronic signatures, meeting records, and one detail that made my pulse slow. Every approval connected to Project Falcon had been signed by executives. Except my wife. Her signature never appeared. Instead, everything had been approved by one man. Victor Hahn, Evergreen's chief financial officer. Interesting. Very interesting. If my wife had ordered the transfers herself, there would be evidence. Instead, she had remained strangely distant. Protected. Almost as though someone wanted her untouched. Or someone wanted her to take the blame later. That evening my phone vibrated again. This time it was Daniel Wu, former vice president of Astor. One of the first engineers I had ever hired. I heard where you're working. You found me quickly. I still know people. He looked around the tiny office before laughing softly. I can't believe you're actually here. I like the view. You hate traffic. I hated pretending more. Daniel's smile faded. They're changing everything. I expected that. They fired 23 department heads. So soon. They called it restructuring. I leaned back quietly. What about research? Budget cut. My laboratories? Half closed. The prototype division? He hesitated. They canceled it. I closed my eyes briefly. That department had been developing clean energy systems for 4 years. It wasn't profitable yet, but it would have changed the company. They killed the future. They said short-term returns matter more. Daniel placed several folders on the desk. I copied what I could. You shouldn't have. I know. If they discover this, they won't. His voice hardened. They're destroying everything you built. I signed it away. You sacrificed it. Same result. No. He looked at me with unusual seriousness. Those aren't the same thing. Silence filled the room. Finally, he sighed. What will you do? For now. Yes. Nothing. He frowned. They expect you to fight. I'm not interested. They'll think you're weak. Let them. Because people who underestimated quiet men usually became careless. Across the city. Evergreen Group. Top floor executive office. Lin Yuhan stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking thousands of lights. Victor Han entered without knocking. The transition went smoothly. I know. Your husband hasn't caused trouble. He won't. Victor smiled. You sound confident. I know him. He visited the station today. Her eyes moved. Only slightly. Station? Central Station. He watched her carefully. He met someone. Who? We don't know. She turned around. What else? He rented an office. Good. Victor blinked. Good. If he's working, he isn't wasting away. Mrs. Lin. She interrupted him. Anything related to Project Falcon? His expression remained perfectly composed. No. She nodded once. You may leave. After he left, she remained standing alone. The office felt much larger without another person inside it. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside rested an old photograph. Two exhausted young entrepreneurs eating instant noodles on a warehouse floor. Both smiling. She touched the edge of the picture. I'm sorry. The whisper vanished into the empty office. No one heard it. Late that night, someone broke into my office. I woke because of the sound of glass. By the time I reached the staircase, a shadow had already disappeared through the rear exit. The room had been searched. Drawers opened. Boxes overturned. Nothing valuable was missing. Except the Project Falcon documents. Every copy. Gone. Only one item remained untouched. My father's mechanical watch. Whoever entered hadn't come to steal. They came for one thing. Evidence. And they believed I still had all of it. They were wrong. Before sleeping, I had photographed every single page. At sunrise, I sat inside a small cafe across from my office. The broken window upstairs had already been covered with plywood. The waitress placed a cup of black coffee in front of me. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't. She nodded sympathetically before walking away. I opened my laptop. Every photograph from the missing documents filled the screen. One image caught my attention immediately. An invoice. Amount. $18.6 million. Purpose. Equipment modernization. But the supplier address belonged to an empty warehouse. I enlarged the image, then enlarged it again. A faded company seal became visible. Blue Horizon Logistics. I searched public records. Registered 6 months ago. No employees. No operating history. No equipment. Nothing. A shell company. Exactly as the anonymous note had suggested. The money hadn't modernized anything. It had vanished. The bell above the cafe door rang. Daniel entered carrying breakfast. You look terrible. So do you. He sat down. I heard about the break-in. News travels fast. You still think doing nothing is the right move? I'm not doing nothing. What are you doing? I'm watching. He frowned. Watching. When people believe they've already won, they relax. Exactly. Daniel finally smiled. There you are. What? The old Zhao. I never disappeared. You did. He stirred his coffee slowly. You spent years protecting everyone. I chose that. You protected investors. I did. You protected employees. Yes. You even protected Evergreen. I looked outside. Traffic crawled through the morning rain. I also protected my marriage. Daniel didn't answer. Some truths required no response. 3 days later, Evergreen announced its quarterly earnings. Record profits. Financial media praised Lin Yuhan's leadership. Business magazines called the acquisition brilliant. Television hosts described her as the country's most decisive CEO. I watched the interview from the bookstore television downstairs. A reporter smiled. Mrs. Lin, many people say acquiring Astor Dynamics was your greatest achievement. She remained composed. It was a strategic decision. Were negotiations difficult? A pause. Then, No. That single word landed heavier than I expected. Not difficult. Because I never fought. The interview continued. I switched off the television. The bookstore owner glanced at me cautiously. You don't seem angry. I'm tired. There's a difference? A very big one. Anger wanted to destroy. Fatigue simply stopped carrying what was never meant to be mine forever. That afternoon, Iris Shun returned unexpectedly. This time she looked anxious. You need to leave. Why? They're investigating everyone connected to Aster. I expected that. No. She leaned closer. They think someone gave you copies. I remained silent. They're checking security footage. They'll find you. I know. Then why come here? She reached into her coat pocket. This. A small encrypted hard drive. I couldn't copy everything before resigning. What is it? The complete Falcon archive. I stared at it. You kept this. I hid it. For me. For the truth. Before I could speak, footsteps echoed outside. A black sedan stopped across the street. Two men stepped out. Dark suits. Expressionless. Iris noticed them immediately. They found me. Come upstairs. No. She shook her head firmly. If they see me with you, they'll watch you forever. They're already watching. She smiled despite the danger. Then don't waste the head start I gave you. She slipped the drive into my hand. Without another word, she crossed the street in the opposite direction. The two men followed her. Not running. Walking. Confident. Professionals. Within seconds, all three disappeared around the corner. Daniel emerged from the bookstore. Who were they? I don't know. You do. I looked at the hard drive resting in my palm. I know enough. The answers I had been searching for were finally within reach. But deep inside, a far more unsettling question refused to leave my mind. If Victor Hahn had orchestrated Project Falcon, why had my wife willingly pushed me away instead of asking for my help? Somewhere behind her cold decisions, a truth remained hidden, and for the first time, I wasn't certain whether she was the architect of my downfall, or another piece on someone else's board. The encrypted drive sat on my desk for nearly an hour before I touched it. Not because I feared what it contained, because I feared what it would change. Outside, the afternoon rain tapped steadily against the window, turning the city into a blur of gray and silver. Daniel stood beside the bookshelf, arms crossed. You're stalling. I know. That's unlike you. I've learned that every answer comes with a price. He nodded. So pay it. I plugged the drive into my laptop. A password screen appeared. Only 4 words were displayed beneath it. She already knows. I frowned. What kind of password hint is that? Daniel leaned closer. Try her birthday. I shook my head. Too obvious. Our wedding anniversary. No. The sentence echoed in my mind again. She already knows. Not. She will know. Already. I closed my eyes. The only phrase my wife had repeated throughout our marriage whenever we solved impossible engineering problems surfaced naturally. Truth survives patience. I typed. Truth survives patience. The drive unlocked instantly. Daniel stared. Seriously? She hated simple passwords. Hundreds of folders appeared. Emails. Contracts. Internal recordings. Financial ledgers. Minutes from executive meetings. There was enough information to bury several corporations. I opened the earliest file. Date. 22 months ago. Subject. Acquisition strategy, Aster Dynamics. My breathing slowed. 22 months. She had begun planning to acquire my company nearly 2 years earlier. I continued reading. Meeting attendees. Victor Hahn. Legal Department. Investment Division. External consultants. No mention of Lin Yuhan. Yet, near the bottom of the minutes, a single sentence caught my attention. CEO absent. Proceed under CFO authorization. Absent. Again. Every major Falcon meeting showed the same pattern. Victor attended. She didn't. It wasn't coincidence anymore. It was deliberate. Daniel pulled another document onto the screen. Look at this. It was an internal email. From Victor. To the board. CEO remains emotionally compromised regarding Aster Dynamics. Sensitive matters should continue through finance until integration is complete. Daniel blinked. What does emotionally compromised mean? I answered quietly. It means they believed she wouldn't approve. So Victor bypassed her? I don't know yet. But someone wanted the board to believe she wasn't objective. That changed everything. If Victor had isolated her, then the acquisition hadn't simply been corporate strategy. It had become personal manipulation. Still, one question remained. Why had she never told me? A hidden folder required another password. This time there was no hint. Only a file name. Emergency protocol. I tried several combinations. Nothing. Daniel sighed. We're missing something. I leaned back. My eyes wandered toward the photograph resting beside the laptop. It was one of the few things saved from my old office. Our first product launch. Everyone wore blue company shirts. Except my wife. She wore a white jacket. On the sleeve, embroidered in tiny silver letters. Falcon. My heartbeat quickened. Not Project Falcon. Just Falcon. That had been the nickname of the first drone prototype we built together 10 years ago. Only 4 people knew it. I entered. Falcon 01. Access granted. Daniel let out a slow whistle. Whoever encrypted this knew your history. Inside waited dozens of video recordings. The first began automatically. Victor Hahn appeared on screen. Not during a meeting. Inside a private office. He was speaking to someone whose face remained outside the camera. We're close. A woman's voice answered. What about the CEO? Still protecting her husband. Victor laughed. It won't matter. What if she refuses? Then we'll make the decision for her. The recording ended. Daniel's face darkened. That wasn't her voice. No. Do you recognize it? I listened again. Smooth. Controlled. Familiar. But I couldn't place it. Not yet. My phone rang. Lin Yuhan. For several seconds, I simply watched the screen. Daniel gestured. Answer. I did. Her voice sounded quieter than usual. Where are you? My office. I need to see you. About what? Aster. There isn't an Aster anymore. Silence. Then. There are things you don't understand. I agree. Can we meet? Why now? Another pause. I can't explain over the phone. I looked toward the laptop. Victor's face remained frozen on the screen. I'll think about it. Before she could respond, the call disconnected. Not because either of us hung up. The signal vanished. Seconds later, every light inside the office went dark. Power outage. Daniel walked to the window. Only this building. Across the street, every shop still had electricity. Someone had cut our power. Specifically, the emergency lights flickered weakly. Daniel reached instinctively toward the drawer where he knew I kept a flashlight. Before he could open it, footsteps echoed on the staircase. Slow. Measured. One person. Not rushing. Not hiding. Whoever it was wanted us to know they were coming. The office door opened. An elderly man entered wearing the maintenance uniform of the building. Except, he wasn't carrying tools. He carried a sealed envelope. I'm looking for Mr. Zhao. I'm Zhao. He handed me the envelope. No return address. Who sent it? They paid cash. When? 5 minutes ago. He left immediately. Inside was a single photograph. It showed my wife entering an underground parking garage late at night. Across from her stood Victor Hahn. Nothing unusual. Until I turned the picture over. Handwritten in black ink. She never agreed. Asked why she cried afterward. I stared at the sentence. Daniel read it twice. Cried. I've never seen her cry at work. Maybe whoever sent this wants to manipulate you. Maybe. But the handwriting matched the anonymous notes from before. The same person. The same careful strokes. Whoever was helping me had remained consistent. That evening I drove to the underground garage shown in the photograph. Not because I expected answers. Because I needed context. The security guard recognized the picture immediately. That was almost a year ago. You remember? There was shouting. Between them. He nodded. The lady looked furious. What about the man? He kept saying something. What? The guard frowned, trying to remember. Sign it. What else? Before he finds out. My chest tightened. Who? I don't know. The old guard shook his head apologetically. They went downstairs after that. Did anyone else arrive? He hesitated. Yes. Who? A woman. Can you describe her? Elegant. Age. Maybe 50. Did you know her? No. What happened? The guard lowered his voice. The younger lady, my wife, came back alone. And she was crying. The sentence lingered in the stale air of the parking garage. Crying. On the same night. At the same place. Where Victor demanded someone sign something. What had she refused? Back at my office, Daniel had been organizing the Falcon archive. You should see this. He rotated the monitor toward me. One spreadsheet listed dozens of offshore transfers. Most had been approved by Victor. One approval shocked me. The beneficiary wasn't a company. It was a private trust. Name: Margaret Hahn Foundation. Margaret. Victor's mother, Daniel guessed. I searched public records. Margaret Hahn had died 9 years earlier. The foundation shouldn't even exist. Yet over $84 million had flowed into it. Daniel rubbed his forehead. This isn't just fraud. No, it's theft. And something bigger. Because money that large didn't disappear without protection. Someone powerful stood behind Victor. Someone still hidden. Near midnight, my office phone rang. Not my cell. The landline. Only 3 people even knew the number. I answered. A distorted voice whispered, "Stop looking into Falcon." I remained silent. "You've already lost your company." Still silent. "Don't lose your life." The line clicked. Disconnected. Daniel looked at me. "Police." I slowly set the receiver down. "No." "Why not?" "Because whoever called knows where we are. And if they're confident enough to threaten me, they're confident enough to erase evidence before police arrive." Daniel cursed under his breath. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then, I opened the drawer beneath my desk. Inside rested the company seal I had quietly kept years ago. Not because it held legal value anymore. Because it reminded me who I had once been. I placed it gently on the desk. "I spent 11 years building something." Daniel nodded. "You did. I won't destroy myself trying to take it back." "So what now?" I looked toward the growing stack of evidence. Now, a calm certainty settled inside me. We let the truth choose its own moment. Outside, another black sedan rolled slowly past the bookstore before disappearing into the rain. Someone was still watching, but they no longer knew everything I knew. And somewhere inside Evergreen Tower, Victor Hahn had no idea that the first crack in his carefully built empire had already appeared. The rain finally stopped after 4 straight days. From the window of my small office, the city looked freshly washed, as though it had decided to hide every stain beneath reflected sunlight. People called that a new beginning. I knew better. Rain never erased anything. It only delayed when the dirt became visible again. Daniel dropped a thick folder onto my desk. "I found something." I looked up. "You haven't slept." "Neither have you." He pushed the folder toward me. "Victor's calendar." I frowned. "How?" "He isn't as careful as he thinks." Inside were copies of executive schedules stretching back nearly 2 years. At first glance, they looked ordinary. Board meetings, investor lunches, government conferences. But someone had highlighted a recurring appointment. Every second Thursday, 11:30 p.m. No location. Only 2 words. Private review. For 21 consecutive months. Daniel tapped the page. "No executive meeting starts at midnight." "It isn't a meeting." "What is it?" "I don't know. But whatever Falcon really is." I closed the folder. "It probably lives there." That afternoon, Iris Shen returned. Her usually composed face carried visible fatigue. "They've frozen my bank accounts." I stood. "They're retaliating. They're sending a message." Daniel offered her a chair. She refused. "There isn't much time." She placed a company identification badge on the desk. "Victor has a private archive beneath Evergreen Tower." My eyes narrowed. "Beneath?" She nodded. "It doesn't appear on official building plans." "What's stored there?" "I was never allowed inside." "Then how do you know?" "I audited the maintenance invoices." She slid another document across the desk. "Monthly security costs. Biometric systems. Independent generators. Air filtration. A private server room." No ordinary records archive required that level of protection. Daniel whispered. "They built a vault." Iris nodded. "Exactly." That evening, I stood across the street from Evergreen Tower. For years I had entered through the front doors without thinking. Now I looked at the building like a stranger. It felt strangely appropriate. Daniel adjusted his cap. "We're really doing this." "We're observing." "Only observing?" "Yes." He laughed softly. "I keep forgetting you're incapable of acting recklessly. We already have evidence. So why come?" "Evidence explains." I looked toward the tower. "People reveal." At precisely 11:24 p.m., a black sedan arrived. Victor Hahn stepped out. Alone. No driver. No assistants. He entered through the underground parking entrance instead of the lobby. 6 minutes later, another vehicle arrived. A silver sedan. The woman who stepped out froze me in place. Elegant. Mid-50s. Pearl earrings. Gray silk coat. The same woman the parking garage guard had described. Daniel whispered. "Know her?" "No. But she knows Victor." She disappeared inside. Neither checked into the main lobby. Neither appeared on security logs visible from reception. They simply vanished. Underground. The following morning, I visited someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Retired Judge Chun. my late father's closest friend. He poured tea without asking questions. You've become thinner. I've become quieter. He smiled faintly. Those often happen together. I handed him copies of the Falcon transactions. He adjusted his glasses. Minutes passed. Then 20. Finally, he looked up. This isn't normal fraud. I suspected as much. He tapped 3 separate transfers. These payments passed through charitable trusts. So, that requires political protection. I remained silent. He continued. Someone important benefits from Falcon. Can it be proven? If you expose this carelessly. He removed his glasses. You won't reach court alive. The room fell quiet. Most people would have heard a warning. I heard advice. There was a difference. I'm not planning revenge. I know. Judge Chen smiled. You sound exactly like your father. That evening, Lin Yuhan appeared outside my office. Alone. No security. No luxury car. She wore a simple black coat and looked noticeably tired. The bookstore owner quietly locked the front door before leaving us alone. Neither of us spoke immediately. She looked around the tiny office. So this is where you've been. It's enough. It shouldn't have to be. I gestured toward the chair. She remained standing. You've lost weight. I've lost many things. Her lips tightened. I deserve that. No. I shook my head gently. You deserved honesty. Silence stretched between us. Finally she spoke. I never wanted your company. I didn't answer. I wanted to protect it. My expression remained unchanged. I know how that sounds. It sounds impossible. I know. She reached into her bag. For a moment I thought she would produce another contract. Instead, she placed an old wedding photograph on my desk. The frame was cracked. I've carried this every day. I looked at the smiling couple inside. 2 people who believed hard work solved everything. What do you want from me? Her voice trembled almost imperceptibly. I want you to believe one thing. What? When I asked you to sign. She closed her eyes briefly. I believed it was the only way to keep you alive. The sentence settled over the room like winter. I stared at her, neither shocked nor convinced. Simply waiting. She seemed to understand. You don't believe me. I don't know what to believe anymore. You shouldn't. A bitter smile crossed her face. I made sure of that. Daniel quietly stepped toward the staircase. I'll give you both some privacy. Neither of us stopped him. When the door closed, only the ticking wall clock remained. I folded my hands. Start at the beginning. She nodded. About 2 years ago, Victor approached me. I guessed as much. He brought investors. What kind? He never said. He threatened you? Not immediately. She looked toward the window. They wanted Astor. They could have offered to buy it. They didn't want to buy it. They wanted control. Her eyes met mine. They wanted you. I frowned. Me? You designed something during the clean energy project. Understanding flickered. The adaptive storage system. She nodded. The patents. I never finalized them. You didn't. She swallowed. They stole the drafts. The room became very quiet. My prototype had never been about batteries. It was about energy distribution. It could reduce industrial power waste dramatically. Worth billions. I destroyed the final calculations. I know. They can't complete it. They thought you kept another copy. I leaned back slowly. And they believed taking Astor would force me to reveal it. Yes. So you transferred the company. So they would stop watching you. I almost laughed. They threw me out the next day. I know. You locked me out. Tears gathered in her eyes for the first time. I ordered the house sealed because Victor's people were already inside. What? They had copied keys. They searched our home 3 times. I remembered small things. Drawers slightly open. Books misplaced. My workshop smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume. At the time, I had blamed my own exhaustion. I had been wrong. They were looking for your research. She lowered her head. I couldn't tell you. Why? Every phone. She looked toward my desk. Every office. Every boardroom. Was monitored. I closed my eyes. Years of conversations replayed in my memory. Arguments. Business discussions. Late-night planning. How many ears had listened? A sharp knock interrupted us. 3 knocks. Evenly spaced. Not hurried. Daniel opened the door before I could respond. A courier stood outside. No sender. He handed over a sealed package. Inside rested a USB drive. Nothing else. No note. No explanation. Daniel plugged it into an isolated laptop. A single video file appeared. Timestamp. 1 hour earlier. Security footage. Evergreen Tower. Underground level. Victor Hahn entered the hidden archive. Behind him, the elegant woman in pearls. Then, a third person stepped into view. The camera angle revealed his face clearly. Judge Chen slowly removed his glasses. For several seconds, no one spoke. Impossible. The retired judge. My father's oldest friend. The man who had warned me only yesterday. He walked into the archive beside Victor. Daniel whispered, "No." The video continued. Judge Chen shook Victor's hand. Then all three disappeared behind a reinforced steel door. The recording ended. Silence crushed the room. My wife looked as stunned as I felt. "He told me to be careful," I murmured. Daniel stared at the blank screen. Maybe he was. I slowly stood. No. My voice remained calm. People don't secretly meet criminals at midnight to offer legal advice. Every certainty I had built over the past week shifted beneath my feet. Victor Han had never been acting alone. The invisible hand behind Falcon had finally revealed itself, and it wore the face of the man I had trusted almost as much as my own father. I didn't sleep that night. Not because Judge Chun had betrayed me, because I kept searching for the moment I should have seen it. Every conversation, every piece of advice, every warning, none of it had been false. That was the cruelest part. He had warned me to move carefully because he understood exactly how dangerous Falcon truly was. He simply never intended for me to survive long enough to expose it. Morning sunlight crept across the office floor. Daniel looked exhausted. Lin Yuhan hadn't left. She sat quietly by the window, a cup of untouched tea cooling in her hands. For the first time in years, there was no argument between us. Only silence. Finally, she spoke. "I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything. I owe you the truth." I nodded once. "Then give it to me." She reached into her bag and removed a thin leather notebook. I started writing everything the day I realized Victor wasn't acting alone. I opened it. Every page was dated. Every meeting summarized. Every suspicious conversation recorded in neat handwriting. She had written names, times, locations, license plate numbers, even fragments of conversations she had overheard. Daniel flipped through the pages slowly. "This is enough to destroy careers." Lin looked down. "I never had enough to save lives." I looked at her. "You thought giving them Aster would protect me." "Yes." "It didn't." "I know." A tear finally escaped down her cheek. "I failed. For months I had imagined this moment. I thought I would feel vindicated. Instead, I saw only a woman carrying more guilt than anyone should." "You made the wrong decision." She nodded. "I did. But you didn't make it because you hated me." Her shoulders trembled. "No. You made it because you were afraid." She covered her face. I was terrified. I gently closed the notebook. "We can't change what happened." "No. But we can decide what happens next." By afternoon, the evidence filled nearly every inch of the office. The Falcon archive, Lin's notebook, financial transfers, anonymous photographs, recorded conversations. Daniel rubbed his temples. "This is too much." "It isn't enough." "What do you mean?" "If we release everything now." I looked toward the stacks of paper. "They'll claim it's fabricated." Lin understood immediately. "They'll bury it." "Exactly. We need witnesses." Daniel nodded. "And people inside Evergreen. People who saw enough to speak." For the first time since losing my company, I wasn't reacting to events. I was preparing for them. Not revenge. Resolution. Over the next week, something unexpected happened. People began finding me. Not the powerful. Not investors. Ordinary employees. A receptionist who remembered invoices arriving after midnight. An engineer who had been ordered to alter prototype records. A warehouse supervisor who noticed equipment that never reached its destination. Each carried only a small piece. Together, they formed a picture. No one came because I asked. They came because someone finally stopped being afraid first. Iris, Daniel, Lin. Courage spread quietly, much quieter than fear. News of Victor's behavior also began leaking inside Evergreen. Executives who had once praised him now avoided his office. Meetings were canceled. Law firms quietly withdrew representation. Banks delayed approvals. No accusation had been made publicly. Yet confidence, the one thing corporations valued above all else, had begun disappearing. Victor noticed. Of course he did. He summoned emergency board meetings, demanded loyalty, threatened dismissals. The harder he tightened his grip, the more people slipped away. Consequences had begun, and no one could stop them. 1 month after I signed away Aster Dynamics, I stood once again outside Evergreen Tower. This time, I wasn't there as its founder, or as a husband, or as a victim. I was there because the Independent Corporate Ethics Commission had requested every surviving witness appear together. No speeches, no accusations, only evidence. Inside the hearing room, dozens of executives filled the seats. Lawyers, auditors, investigators. Victor Han entered confidently. Judge Chun followed behind him. Neither expected to see me. Victor smiled politely. Mr. Zhao, Mr. Han, I heard you're doing consulting work these days. I've been keeping busy. I'm glad. His confidence looked rehearsed. Judge Chin didn't even meet my eyes. The commissioners entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. One witness spoke. Then another. Then another. No dramatic shouting. No theatrical confrontations. Just facts. Dates. Transfers. Approvals. Security records. One engineer calmly explained how invoices had been falsified. A warehouse manager described equipment that never existed. An auditor confirmed duplicate payment trails. Iris testified with remarkable composure. Daniel followed. Finally, Lin Yuhan stood. The room became perfectly silent. Victor's expression tightened. She placed her notebook onto the evidence table. This is my personal record covering the last 22 months. A commissioner asked quietly, "Why did you keep it?" She answered without hesitation. "Because someday." She looked toward me briefly. Someone deserved the truth. The notebook was entered into evidence. Investigators compared every handwritten entry against emails recovered from Falcon. Everything matched. Victor's smile vanished. Judge Chin requested a recess. The request was denied. For the first time, they had lost control of the room. Hours later, the commission suspended Victor Han pending criminal investigation. Judge Chin quietly surrendered his legal credentials before anyone requested them. No shouting, no handcuffs, no dramatic collapse. Just two powerful men leaving through separate doors while avoiding everyone's eyes. Outside the building, reporters gathered in overwhelming numbers. Microphones surrounded me. "Mr. Zhao, do you feel you've won? What will happen to Aster Dynamics? Will you sue Evergreen?" I stopped walking, thought carefully, then answered, "I didn't come here to win." The cameras fell silent. I came so people who told the truth wouldn't have to stand alone. No more, no less. I continued walking. No interview, no celebration, no revenge, only relief. Across the plaza, Lin Yuhan stood waiting. She didn't ask whether I could forgive her. I didn't offer promises I couldn't yet make. Some wounds deserved honesty more than quick answers. She simply asked, "What will you do now?" I looked across the city. Somewhere beyond the crowded skyline stood a small office above an old bookstore. A place where I had started over with nothing but a desk, a notebook, and the decision to stop sacrificing myself. I smiled for what felt like the first genuine time in years. I'm going to build something that no one owns except the people who create it. She returned the smile. Not because everything had been repaired, because healing had finally begun. 2 years later, the sign outside the renovated brick building was deliberately modest. Northbridge Labs. No gold lettering. No towering glass headquarters. No oversized logo proclaiming success. Just a clean metal plaque beside a wide wooden door. Inside, engineers argued over circuit diagrams, software developers debated algorithms, and interns wandered between workstations carrying cups of coffee far too full for their own good. The atmosphere reminded me of Aster Dynamics before ambition had become politics. Daniel walked into my office carrying 2 folders. "You have visitors." I thought today's schedule was clear. It was. He smiled knowingly. Until they arrived. "Who?" "The university team." I laughed. "Already? They're early." Northbridge had become something I never imagined during the darkest days after losing my company. Not the largest engineering company. Not the richest. But perhaps the most respected. Every employee owned shares. Every major decision required transparent voting. Financial records were open to every department. No hidden approvals. No invisible boardrooms. No secrets disguised as strategy. People sometimes called the system inefficient. I called it peaceful. The afternoon passed with prototype demonstrations and scholarship interviews. Just before sunset, Daniel knocked again. "This one's personal." I looked up. Lin Yuhan stood quietly in the doorway. She looked different. Less polished. More human. Her hair was shorter. The expensive executive suits had been replaced by a simple navy coat. "You can come in." She smiled faintly. "I wasn't sure you'd say that." I wasn't sure either. She sat across from my desk. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence. After a moment, she slid a document toward me. I've officially resigned. From Evergreen? She nodded. My contract ended. And I won't return to corporate management. I looked at her. What will you do? I've accepted a teaching position. I couldn't hide my surprise. Business ethics. A quiet laugh escaped me. Life has a sense of humor. It does. She laughed too, for the first time in years. It sounded genuine. I visited our old house last week, she said softly. Our house. It isn't ours anymore. I nodded. Evergreen had sold the property months after the investigation. What was it like? Empty. She looked out the window. I realized something. What? I spent years protecting walls instead of the people inside them. I remained silent. She continued. I've apologized to everyone I hurt. Did it help? No. She smiled sadly. But it was necessary. I understood. Forgiveness was never a transaction. You didn't apologize because it erased pain. You apologized because truth deserved to be spoken. She stood to leave. At the door she paused. I don't expect another chance. I know. I just wanted you to know. She took a slow breath. That losing you was the greatest failure of my life. After she left, I remained standing by the window for a long time. Not grieving. Not hoping. Simply accepting. Some relationships ended because love disappeared. Ours ended because fear spoke louder than trust. There was a difference. One could be mourned. The other could only be learned from. Several weeks later, a familiar face appeared in the laboratory. Iris Shun carried a stack of engineering journals. I heard you're hiring. We are. For accountants? I smiled. For people who refuse to lie. She laughed. I qualify. She eventually became Northbridge's financial director. Daniel called it poetic justice. I called it common sense. The books remained cleaner than they had ever been. Autumn arrived quietly. Golden leaves drifted across the courtyard outside Northbridge Labs. The company celebrated its third successful product launch with a small picnic instead of an extravagant banquet. Engineers grilled food. Interns challenged senior researchers to basketball. Families wandered freely through the gardens. No reserved tables. No executive platform. Everyone belonged. Daniel handed me a paper cup of tea. You look happy. I look old. You've always been old. I laughed. You've always been rude. Across the lawn, several young engineers demonstrated a new energy storage prototype inspired by ideas I had once believed were lost forever. One of them approached nervously. Mr. Zhao. Yes. We used part of your original research. I noticed. We improved it. I hope so. He hesitated. Aren't you upset? If the next generation doesn't surpass mine. I looked toward the cheering crowd. Then I failed as an engineer. His face lit up. He hurried back toward his team. Daniel watched him leave. You've changed. I had to. No. He shook his head. You chose to. Maybe he was right. Late that afternoon, I received one final letter. No return address. Inside was a short handwritten note. Truth survives patience. The same words that had unlocked the Falcon archive. Beneath them was a newspaper clipping. Victor Han had pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and financial crimes. Judge Chun had accepted full responsibility for abusing his position and permanently withdrawn from public life before sentencing. There were no triumphant headlines in my mind. Only quiet closure. I folded the letter and placed it inside my desk drawer beside my father's watch. Some chapters deserved to remain closed. As evening settled over the campus, I locked the laboratory doors and stepped outside. The city skyline glowed in the distance. Years ago, I had believed success meant standing at the top of the tallest building. I had been wrong. Success wasn't measured by how much you owned. It was measured by how little fear controlled your decisions. I once signed away everything because I was afraid someone I loved would change her mind. That trembling hand had felt like the weakest moment of my life. Looking back, it wasn't weakness. It was the final sacrifice of a man who had forgotten his own worth. Losing my company forced me to discover something far more valuable. No contract could transfer integrity. No betrayal could erase character. No powerful person could permanently own another person's future. The wind carried the sound of laughter from inside the laboratory. Young engineers. New ideas. Fresh beginnings. I smiled, turned off the last light, and walked home without looking back. The end.